I used to spend every weekend working in my garden, weeding, watering, fertilizing, staking, and constantly battling problems that seemed to multiply faster than I could solve them. The work was exhausting, and by the time winter arrived, I was relieved to see the season end. Then something changed. I discovered an approach that cut my labor by 80% while actually increasing my harvests. My neighbors still call it lazy gardening, and I suppose they are right. But this lazy method now feeds my family all winter long, while I spend most of the growing season relaxing instead of working. The secret is not doing less, but doing differently. The foundation of lazy gardening is understanding what plants actually need versus what we have been taught to provide. Most gardening advice assumes constant intervention is necessary. Bare soil must be cultivated. Weeds must be pulled. Fertilizer must be applied. Water must be delivered on schedule. These recommendations create endless work, and they are largely unnecessary when you design your garden correctly from the start. Plants grew perfectly well for millions of years before humans decided to help them. Our job is not to replace natural systems, but to create conditions where those systems can function without our constant involvement. The first principle of lazy gardening is permanent mulch. Instead of leaving soil bare between plants, you cover every inch with organic material. Straw leaves, wood chips, grass clippings, anything that was once alive becomes a thick blanket over the ground. This single change eliminates most of the work conventional gardens require. Weeds cannot germinate through several inches of mulch, so you stop weeding almost entirely. Soil stays moist beneath the covering, so you water far less frequently. Fertility builds as the bottom layer decomposes, so you stop buying fertilizer. The mulch does the work while you do other things. I apply mulch at least 6 inches deep and add more throughout the season as it compresses and breaks down. The initial investment in materials pays back many times over in saved labor and improved results. I collect leaves in fall bags, and bags of them from neighbors who consider them waste. I gather grass clippings from lawns that would otherwise send them to landfills. I accept straw from local farms happy to dispose of spoiled bales. All of these materials are free, and they become the labor-saving foundation of my garden. The second principle is choosing plants that take care of themselves. Some vegetables demand constant attention, while others grow practically wild once established. Lazy gardening emphasizes the second category. Perennial vegetables return year after year without replanting. Self-seeding annuals drop seeds that germinate the following season without any help from you. Vigorous varieties outcompete weeds and resist pests through their own natural defenses. By selecting the right plants, you build a garden that wants to succeed rather than one that struggles without constant support. My lazy garden is anchored by perennials that I planted once and have harvested for years. Asparagus sends up spears every spring from roots that are now over a decade old. Rhubarb produces stalks so abundantly that I give away more than I can use. Walking onions multiply themselves across my beds and provide onions year-round. Jerusalem artichokes spread vigorously and yield tubers every fall without any care whatsoever. Sorrel and lovage provide fresh greens from the earliest days of spring until hard frost. These plants ask nothing from me except occasional harvest. Self-seeding annuals fill gaps between perennials and create the illusion of careful planning with zero effort. Lettuce that bolts and goes to seed in summer germinates on its own in fall, giving me a second crop I never planted. Arugula spreads throughout my beds, appearing wherever conditions suit it. Dill, cilantro, and parsley reseed so reliably that I stopped buying seeds for them years ago. Cherry tomatoes drop fruit that overwinters and sprouts in spring. I did not plan these volunteers, but I welcome them, and they contribute significantly to my harvest. The third principle is working with natural cycles rather than fighting against them. Conventional gardening tries to impose human schedules on biological systems. We want tomatoes in April and lettuce in August, regardless of whether those crops want to grow then. This conflict creates enormous work as we battle temperature, moisture, and day length to force plants into unnatural patterns. Lazy gardening accepts that each crop has an ideal season and works within those limits rather than against them. The result is less work and better harvests because plants grow more vigorously when conditions match their preferences. I grow cool season crops in spring and fall when they thrive naturally and stop fighting to keep lettuce alive in summer heat. I plant warm season crops only when soil has truly warmed and let frost end their season rather than rushing to protect them. This acceptance of natural rhythms means I spend far less time fighting losing battles and far more time enjoying easy victories. The garden produces abundantly during each season because I am growing what wants to grow rather than what I wish would grow. The fourth principle is designing for harvest rather than maintenance. Every element in my garden serves the goal of producing food with minimum ongoing work. Paths are wide enough to walk comfortably with a harvest basket. Beds are narrow enough to reach the center without stepping on soil. Perennials are positioned where their spreading habit benefits rather than conflicts with neighbors. Storage crops grow near the root cellar, and salad crops grow near the kitchen. These design decisions eliminate countless small inefficiencies that would otherwise accumulate into hours of unnecessary labor. Winter harvest is where lazy gardening truly proves its value. Most gardeners stop eating from their gardens when frost arrives, but my harvest continues through the coldest months. The key is growing crops that either tolerate freezing or store without refrigeration. Kale, spinach, and mache actually improve in flavor after frost and continue producing under simple low-tunnel protection. Carrots, beets, and parsnips store perfectly right in the ground beneath heavy mulch that prevents freezing. Winter squash and potatoes sit in my root cellar, slowly releasing the summer abundance over months of cold weather. The winter garden requires almost no work once established. I put up low tunnels in late fall using hoops and plastic that have lasted for years. I pile extra mulch over root crops that will stay in the ground. I harvest squash and potatoes and carry them to storage, and then I am done. Throughout winter, I simply walk outside, brush snow off the tunnel, lift the plastic, and pick fresh greens. I dig through mulch to pull carrots and beets as needed. I retrieve squash and potatoes from the cellar. The garden feeds us continuously, while I do almost nothing except collect the food. The economics of this approach are remarkable when calculated honestly. A conventional garden might produce more during peak summer weeks, but requires hundreds of hours of labor to maintain. My lazy garden produces slightly less at peak, but continues through winter and demands perhaps 50 hours of total work per year. When you divide harvest by labor, the lazy method wins decisively. I produce more food per hour of effort, and I enjoy the process instead of dreading it. That enjoyment keeps me gardening year after year, while burnout drives many conventional gardeners to quit. The quality of life improvement extends beyond the garden itself. When I stopped spending weekends weeding, I found time for family activities I had been neglecting. When I stopped worrying about daily watering, I could take vacations without arranging plant sitters. When I stopped the constant battle against nature, I started actually enjoying my time outdoors instead of viewing it as a chore. Lazy gardening gave me back the leisure that conventional gardening had stolen, and the food kept coming anyway. I want to address skepticism from those who believe serious production requires serious work. I understand this reaction because I shared it for years before discovering otherwise. We are taught that hard work is virtuous and that shortcuts produce inferior results. But efficiency is not laziness, and working smarter is not cheating. The methods I use are based on sound ecology and proven by decades of experience from gardeners around the world. They produce excellent results with minimal input because they align with how nature actually functions. Fighting nature requires endless effort. Cooperating with nature requires almost none. The transition to lazy gardening can happen gradually without abandoning your current approach entirely. Start by mulching one bed heavily and comparing it to your unmulched beds over a full season. Add 1 or 2 perennial vegetables to your existing annual plantings. Let one patch of herbs go to seed and observe what happens the following year. These small experiments will convince you through direct experience that less work can indeed produce more food. Once you see the results expanding, the approach becomes irresistible. If you are tired of the endless work that conventional gardening demands, I encourage you to embrace the lazy path. Your garden can feed you all winter with a fraction of the effort you currently invest. The secret is not working harder, but working with nature instead of against it. Mulch deeply choose cooperative plants, accept natural cycles, and design for easy harvest. These principles create gardens that practically run themselves and produce abundance that lasts far beyond the traditional growing season. The lazy gardener eats well all year, while others wonder how such bounty emerges from so little apparent effort. This approach has transformed my relationship with growing food, and it can transform yours as well if you simply allow yourself to let go of the idea that more work equals better results. The garden wants to feed you, and your job is simply to stop getting in its way while enjoying the abundance it provides. Trust the process and give yourself permission to be lazy, because in this case, laziness leads directly to the results you have always wanted from your garden without the exhaustion you thought was required to achieve them. Start now and discover what true garden freedom feels like.